with me closely, okay?
Too much information, well I said you got for nothing. Come out to the back, I said Johnny, let's go for something. Guess I better tell you now, guess I better be alive. Singing for your questions, but you stolen all my answers. Too much entertainment, drunk my nights out on the corner. Tell me that you seen a ghost, I tell you what to feel the most. Stop! I said it's happening again. We're all wasting away. We're all wasting away. Too much information, well I said you got for nothing. I stitch upon a counterfeit, I said you out for hunting. Digging at the roads where you're digging for the simple gold. Swimming with the fishes where the serpent leaves his tongue. With a belly full of splendors, now you see that I'm the one. Tell me that you seen a ghost, I tell you what to fear the most. Stop! Said it's happening again. We're all wasting away. We're all wasting away.
Some Christians cannot handle intense, the intense, psychologically intense aspects of certain themes. They just can't think through it. They end up getting emotionally distressed or whatever the case is. And so this is not for those people. If you feel like you need to have a Dr. Phil sit down to make your emotions feel better, every once in a while, I'm sorry, like just don't listen to this, okay? I'm not wired like that. I'm not wired like that. In fact, I find it cathartic. I find it personally cathartic and relieving to be able to talk through dark issues. It's just how I process my feelings and my thoughts about dark things that exist in our world. So if you cannot handle dark themes, please do not listen to what I'm going to be talking about, okay? If you have therapy-related issues to anxiety, please do not listen to what I'm talking about. Okay? So I'm trying to give you ample warning here. I'm at the 1 minute and 30-second mark. All right? Do not listen to this if you have anxiety problems. Okay. One of the things that has bothered me in the past month or so, since Charlie Kirk got killed, is been trying to process my thought life around Antifa and what's going on in our country at large. And I do not view this as just political clickbait. I view this as a genuine spiritual concern, a genuine security concern for our families. And I've also, as a side effect of all of this, come to realize that podcasting, in addition to television programs, has an influence on the decisions the president makes. Somebody told me a long time ago that media is the fourth arm of the government. How about that? So I'm talking, I'm going to continue to talk about this stuff until this Antifa threat, until this Islam threat is completely gone, and then I will probably not feel the cathartic need to talk through these issues anymore. One of the things that has bothered me in the past 1 to 2 months is these Antifa riots at TPUSA events. That has bothered me very, 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 very much. Why? Not because I agree with every single thing Charlie Kirk ever did, and ever said. I'm sure there's some differences I have with him. It's not my job to do that. It's not my job to lift up an individual and defend him tooth and nail. Okay? Although I generally do agree with most of his politics the more I learn about him. Okay. Why is this Antifa thing going on? Why is it going on? Where'd it come from? Well, I've said it before in the past. These rioters, these No Kings rioters, are the very people that got Mamdani elected to New York mayor. They are the very people working with Bernie Sanders and Bill Nye. He also outed himself as being in on it with them. So that means the whole scientific community is in on it as well. It's an evolutionary mindset that they're in. Okay? That's very clear. Very clear. They're very Darwinistic in the way they think. All right? Very Darwinistic. Scientific atheism is most likely the mindset that they're in. Now, when scientific atheistic people, historically, scientific atheistic are evolutionists, historically, when they get politically active, it leads to concentration camps. Why? Because it is the principle of natural selection being applied to human beings by other human beings. We take all of the people who do not think, quote unquote, smart like they do, scientifically, and we kill them. We take all of the people who are disabled or mentally challenged or have other deformities and handicaps, and we kill them. It's called eugenics. Say eugenics. E-U-G-E-N-I-C-S. Eugenics. Applied natural selection by other human beings to other human beings. The idea is to create a society that is utopian and evolutionary, Okay? There is no spiritual realm in the way these people think. They are so spiritually blind that they actually think that they can take applied natural selection and apply it to society, and it ends up with concentration camps. Concentration camps are the end result of believing in atheistic natural selection. Just so you know, I'm not pulling this out of my head. Look up all the research on this on creation.com. Now, with that being said, I want to talk about the political philosophy that is sometimes implemented by these people, because this is the dangerous part. All right? It's dangerous enough to believe in evolution. It's dangerous enough to obfuscate people's faith in Genesis chapter 1 and get them to the point where they don't believe the entire Word of God on that basis. All right? That's dangerous enough, because now they're in danger of hellfire because they don't believe in the Word of God. They think that they can just play around with it however they like and create these fantasy creatures that lived a really, really long time ago, like half man, half ape type creatures. And so that's dangerous. That's spiritually dangerous, because believing in evolution has always led people into atheism. People like Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, my understanding is he either A, was an Anglican at some point in his youth growing up, or B, was somehow related to missionaries or something like this. He had a Christian upbringing, and everything was fine with him until he started learning about evolution, and then as a result of that became an atheist. And he became the most outspoken atheist person of our time. So Richard Dawkins is a very clear example of a person who went from being a Christian youth, to becoming an atheist, a confirmed, hardened atheist, as a result of evolutionary ideas. Now, because of his evolutionary ideas being popularized through his book God Delusion and many conferences where he hatefully speaks against Christians with an anti-Christian attitude, he's inspired all sorts of other people in the past 25 years to develop a similar attitude. My guess is that these Antifa people are the children of these new atheist people that took their inspiration and lead from Richard Dawkins. That's my guess. Richard Dawkins inspired a new wave of atheism in the West, in America, and then those people ended up creating these agnostic, atheist-type families, and now these kids are fully grown, and now we have some of them in the Antifa group. That's what I think is going on. I think Antifa is the final result of Richard Dawkins and the wonderful work for atheism he did all over the world. So Antifa is the political incarnation, the applied political activism of evolutionary atheists. And what is that? It's communism. Or in some countries, it's called socialism. And although there are subtle differences, they are two sides of the same wicked coin. I don't need to go too deep into it now, although I am planning on preaching entire podcasts against communism and socialism from a traditional Baptist point of view in the days to come, finally got my hands on a book called False Doctrines Answered by Dr. John R. Rice, who was the leading fundamentalist Baptist evangelist and radio preacher from the 1940s to the 1970s. He was the leading type of guy that people listened to in independent Baptist homes in America in that time period. He had Sword of the Lord publications, and he was very burdened by the Holy Spirit to preach against things that are going on in society. He did not confine his idea of ministry simply to just keeping yourself in Bible times all the time. He believed in looking around at what's going on around you and using the Bible to preach against things that don't line up with the Bible. So I agree a lot with him in that sense. I don't agree with him on everything, but I agree with him about a lot of stuff. And so he wrote a chapter in that book on communism and socialism and preached against it, and I'm going to use that to prepare some podcasts against it. It's pretty deep stuff, so there's no way you can wrap it all up in just one little thing, because there's so many little thoughts that have to be built up and then wrapped together into a political philosophy for you to be able to understand what communism and socialism is all about. And why are the two words used? Because there are subtle differences in their application, but they have so much in common. Communism and socialism, they have so much in common, and the most distinctive thing they have in common is that they are against capitalism. That's the most distinctive thing. They are anti-capitalist political ideologies. So what does that mean? Well, ultimately it means that they're anti-American. They are anti-American. They are against the way America's government is set up. This much we can understand. This is all we need to understand for this moment, okay? They are completely against the entire way the United States government is set up in Washington, D.C. This is the most important thing we need to understand about communism and socialism, is that they are anti-Washington, D.C. They are anti-Washington, D.C. The way the whole structure, all those buildings are set up for our government, the way they were set up. And this is why communism and socialism are so dangerous to Americans. They're dangerous for everybody in the world, but they're especially dangerous to Americans and to other governments that are set up like America, because they have every intention of overthrowing quickly, a quick, fast, unexpected, surprising overthrow of governments that operate like America. That's why I'm alarmed about Antifa. That's the reason why. Because it's not a slow, progressive process. It's fast. It's fast. It comes up and bites you in the butt, and everybody's in a concentration camp and they don't know what hit them. Because it comes up and it hits you without warning. That's the way this stuff is. So you need to understand that these Antifa riots are just history replaying itself. It is history replaying itself. There are movies that display this sort of behavior. There's a movie that came out a long time ago called Dr. Zhivago. It was a movie that helps you to understand how Russia went from a normal country to a communist country, how Russia turned into the communist country called the Soviet Union, and how it became ruled by Lenin. It was called the Bolshevik Revolution. And what it was people like Antifa going around acting intentionally violent, intentionally disruptive, to bully people, to scare people, to submit to their authoritarian bullying. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill, boom, 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 boom. Oh, so cool. Yeah, and he's working with these guys. Oh, not so childlike anymore now, is he? Because that's applied evolution to politics. That's what evolution applied to politics is. It's communism. Also called militant atheism. Bill Nye is not a harmless child event type guy. He's willing to do concentration camps against people like Ken Ham and the creation. He would rather them be destroyed and thrown into a concentration camp because they're against his idea of science. These people are anti-Christian to the core, and they hide behind science. They hide behind their intellectualism. They're just anti-Christ at the heart of it all. They've got a vendetta against the gospel because they just want to look at porn and be fornicators. They're just completely possessed by the devil and overridden and controlled by the flesh, and they don't like anything about Christianity at all. That's the issue. It's a spiritual problem these people have with the gospel. Part of it has to do with determinism, an overreaction to Calvinism, which teaches that everything that ever happens in the world is caused by God, including the Holocaust, which they themselves created out of their own stupid atheistic socialist philosophy. Well, you see, they create the atheistic socialist philosophy, then they blame God for causing it. That's the way they think. So evil isn't caused by human beings. Evil isn't caused by Satan and demons. Evil is caused by God. Why? Because he controls everything. See, so it's oftentimes these atheistic people are overreacting to deterministic presentations of predestination. If you really get down to it, anything bad that ever happens in the world is God's fault. Therefore, I'm an atheist now. And so when it comes to it, it's very, very shallow. They just want to live for themselves. And so, because this is their bottom motivation, they fill their heads with all sorts of scientific, intellectual stuff to make themselves look smart, to make them to talk themselves into the idea that, yes, this is the right path because it looks intellectual. But all they're doing is filling their heads with literature. The bottom ground reason why they rejected Christ is pretty stupid. They had absolutely no desire to study Christian doctrine to really get their answers questioned from a church point of view. They're self-centered, wicked, carnal, selfish people that then in turn go to science to fill their head with a bunch of stuff to distract them from Christ. It says that in Romans 1. They suppress the truth with their ungodliness. This is why Ray Comfort has been witnessing to atheists for years and realized that the best way to reach an atheist was to just simply preach the Ten Commandments to them. Because atheists hide behind their intellect and their National Geographic and all of their ideas. When the reality is they have a conscience that has been hardened and a will that does not want to submit to the teachings of the church. Evil exists, God's to blame. Why? Because God controls everything. Suffering exists, God's to blame. Why? Because God controls everything. Therefore, there is no God. Atheism is true. It's flippant. That's the way they think. It's circular, it's flippant, and it doesn't really dig into the Bible to seek honest answers. So socialism and communism basically both come from a book called The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. He was a German. He was a German who sold his soul to the devil. He was basically like, I don't know if there is a devil, but if he is a devil, I want to serve him. Just read Richard Wurmbrand's book, Marx and Satan. He sold his soul to the devil, but he also at the same time was like, there's probably no God. So why don't I create this political philosophy for atheists to live by? And he called it the Communist Manifesto. And this book has become the groundwork for both communism and socialism. And it created this whole philosophy for atheists to create governments. You might say, well, concentration camps are not mentioned in the Communist Manifesto. No, so where does the whole concentration camps thing come from? Good question. Let's answer that. So you have the Bolsheviks people like Antifa going around creating riots, right, to make the government feel afraid and unsure of itself, right? After that stage happens, after they've created enough of a buzz from their crazy, outrageous activity, and these ideas, by the way, are all explained in a book called Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, a book which was dedicated to Satan and his rebellion against God. Also, the Communist Manifesto in its original edition by Karl Marx, that book was dedicated to Charles Darwin because atheism is the reason why he wrote it. Atheism and evolution. So, eventually, these people started working through these thoughts. A guy named Hitler, who was also German, got a copy of the Communist Manifesto and read through it and agreed with a lot of parts of it, but he came off with his own twist. And so Hitler wrote a book called Mein Kampf, which is German for My Struggle. And Hitler created his own version of communism. He didn't agree with Karl Marx on everything. He agreed with him on some things. And so Hitler, because he was a criminal, he went to jail. And so while he was in jail, he wrote this book called Mein Kampf. It was a book written by a politically successful gangster named Adolf Hitler. And this book created his own version of socialist philosophy. And basically the only difference that I can think of off the top of my head, although people who are political science majors could probably go off and rattle off 20 differences if they wanted to, but the main difference that I could say between Mein Kampf, written by Hitler, and Communist Manifesto, written by Marx, the main difference is that Hitler believed that white people, specifically German white people, were the master race. They were the perfect expression of evolutionary natural selection. And so, as a result, he must do everything he can to eliminate everyone who is not that. This, in turn, led to his philosophies. But neither the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx nor Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler taught that people should use concentration camps, so far as I understand. The books eventually led to concentration camps. So let's answer the question. What is it that led to the creation of concentration camps in Russia? Russia was the first to create them. They were called gulags. G-U-L-A-G. Gulags. Lenin did not create concentration camps so far as I understand. His successor did, Stalin, Joseph Stalin. He was also a criminal, and his wife killed herself. He was a criminal, and he was a gangster, and he became the leader of Russia. And he was the first person to invent the gulags, the concentration camps. And then Hitler thought, hey, that's not a bad idea. And so Hitler copied Stalin, and he created concentration camps in Germany, too. Now, Stalin and Hitler invented the concentration camps as they were leading their countries. Why? Well, it's not because concentration camps were written in the Communist Manifesto or in Mein Kampf. If that were the case, they never would have risen to power. The concentration camps thing was done in secret by both of them. It was done in secret because both of these guys had already been to jail as criminals. They were criminals, they were thugs, they were gangsters with way too much political power. And what do gang leaders do when they're trying to win a gang war? They kill their enemies. They kill the competition. And so that's where the concentration camps concept came from. Stalin was a Russian form of Al Capone. Hitler was a German form of Al Capone, and from what I understand, both of them watched black and white gangster movies and were inspired by them. So you have Al Capone gangster people in charge of entire countries. Stalin first came up with the concentration camp idea. Hitler copied him. Neither of these things are integral to communism or socialism, but they grew out of it because both communism and socialism are all about getting away from the process of voting on issues, are all about totalitarianism, giving 100% absolute authority to one person. There were various reasons that led up to a calculated conclusion of concentration camps. The first one was, like I said, the absolute authority of a single leader. The second one was having secret police, not public police that you can see that drive around in a police car, but secret ones. The third thing was labeling entire groups of people as, quote, enemies. Okay? Enemies. Using the word enemies. Now, it's true. Even in our military oath, we are told that we have to defend our country against enemies, both foreign and domestic. But in the concentration camp ideology, enemies becomes a strong concept and is used as the driving force for the concentration camp. For the belief that the state, the government, is able and should eliminate those enemies for the greater good of society. And lastly, number 5, there was no constitutional safeguards, no courts of appeal, and no human rights protections in the governments at the time. Voting would have helped prevent concentration camps from happening, but in and of itself, it was not the only issue. It was the fact that concentration camps were created out of a sort of independent judicial system apart from the public government. So it was something that was done hidden away. Another thing was the creation of a pseudo-media culture, a propaganda culture, no free press. The newspapers, the televisions, the radios, well, they didn't have televisions back then, but they had movie theaters. All forms of media were controlled by the communist government. All forms of media were controlled by the socialist government. All forms of media were controlled by the gangsters at the top of the government socialist government. And so all of the media outlets were lying. And they were just doing what they were told to lie for the leader. There was no free press. There was no freedom of speech. Another thing was, so that's basically it. When people are not allowed to criticize the leader, express independent thought, when there is no court of appeals, there's not a culture of democratic voting going on, not just for the election of the leader, but for the ongoing process of submitting bills to him once he becomes elected. The lying, the brainwashing through the media, through the government-controlled media. Yeah, this is secret police KJB. This is what leads to this stuff. SS. Things are done to a point where there's fake voting going on. Where there's not honesty and transparency. There's a system of voting and checks of balances. The ability to impeach the president or the leader is not there. And I think that it would be fair to say, and please, Mark Levin, any poli-sci person, anybody who knows about this stuff better than me, because this isn't my area of expertise, although I would like to become more knowledgeable and fluent in it. The inability to impeach an oppressor. There were a lot of people in the Nazi Party that wanted out, but they couldn't. They figured, how did we get to this point, and how can we get out of it? The absence of real democratic constraints, not just the voting process, but apparently the House of Representatives, the Congress, and the Senate were absent or powerless. And that's what led to concentration camps. And those things are central. Those things are central to our American way of government and the freedoms that we have. This is why we don't have soldiers trouncing the streets every single day with AK-47s, because we have the House of Representatives and the Congress and the Senate. This is what makes us American. This is what makes our government so distinct. If I think it'd be right in saying that if the Congress and the Senate and the House of Representatives were ever removed, we'd have concentration camps here in no time. Because the ability to impeach a tyrant exists in those groups. And so because Russia and Hitler and Germany didn't have that, they were allowed to do whatever thug thing they wanted to identify people who they viewed as political enemies and just dispose of their bodies in concentration camps.